Welcome to the podcast, Two Gals and a Glass Half Full, hosted by Dr. Bobby and Dr. Jess. They are two physical therapists sharing knowledge on living a more mindful, healthy, and active lifestyle, one small step at a time. If this sparks your interest, these are your two gals.
Hey there, I'm Dr. Bobby, and this is Dr. Jess. We are two physical therapists just trying to live healthy most of the time and doing our best to see our personal glasses as half full. Some days that is much harder than others. We love to interview others to share their knowledge about things we may not know, and other times Dr. Jess and I are sharing our knowledge and information. So make sure you hit the subscribe button below, join our free Facebook group, and follow us on Instagram to receive our latest information. Welcome to May. In May, we will be talking about mental health awareness, different topics with mental health. And we're starting off with one that I feel very passionate about and very excited about. And that will be with social media, the good and the bad. But before we get started, Dr. Jess, what is in your cup today?
I have a glass of kombucha. This is a passion fruit kombucha. So it's quite refreshing and has some probiotics in there. So trying to be a little healthy while having a little flavor to my drink. Dr. Bobby, what's in your glass?
Well, I started the morning, I treated myself to a decaf coffee, and now I am just on plain water. So getting some hydration after a nice large decaf coffee.
I like it. I like it. I like it. So this month in mental health awareness, we're going to be talking about a lot of different topics, and we're trying to, hit a nice spectrum. And so why not start with like a real big ticket item, social media? It's something that's gotten so much attention over the years, where when it was first kind of starting to where it's like this pendulum has gone like, boom, social media is terrible, it's negative, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. But here's the truth, is that it's not going away. So if it's not going away, could there be positives and negatives? So maybe that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to see social media in the light of gray, meaning that there are positives and negatives, and we just need to be aware of what those might be so that we can have a better, healthier relationship with social media. Just like sugar or alcohol or anything else where it could be unhealthy, but it could be, you could find balance. So just it's easy to not have balance is the point, which is how it was developed. And Dr. Barbie's going to go into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing to understand is like why social media became very addictive, very popular, very quickly. And why that happens is because when we're using social media, it activates this area in our brain that's known as like a reward center. So when anything like pleasurable or feel good happens, this area of the brain lights up and it creates chemicals. So think about like pleasurable activities like food, like when you really enjoy food, sex, social interaction, any of those type of things, they light up an area that releases dopamine. And dopamine is a chemical that tells your brain like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. This is great. Well, these platforms are designed to be addictive and to release that dopamine that we kind of crave and want more and more and more. And so that's kind of how, like, I don't know if you've ever picked up your phone and you're all of a sudden you're on social media and you didn't even know. I know I took a time off one time from social media, and I found myself every day trying to click the button that was no longer there. And like, I wasn't even conscious I was doing it. It was just like a habit that had happened. And so that's what we kind of want to talk about today is like how that lights up, how that affects us, but then also how can we manage it? Because there is good. A lot of us run businesses from social media. A lot of us keep in touch with family members and friends that are far away. I know Dr. Jess and I use Zoom, FaceTime a lot to talk to each other. And that's not bad, but just kind of learning how to control it. And also realizing like maybe when it's unhealthy, like what are signs and symptoms that we may see in our body or our thoughts? And then what can we do to kind of bring us back to a little bit more of a balance? There's always going to be a shift side to side. It will never be perfect, but trying to kind of get towards that balance.
Yeah. And I think as long as you have an understanding of like where this could be unhealthy, it helps you better recognize like, oh, I really do need to kind of be careful with this. Like I say, I mean, I have social media in my life is just like alcohol or sugar or anything else, where it's like, one glass of wine is like, okay, cool, versus like not five, right? Like there's limits. And so you don't need to go above the limit. It's not going to get you, it's not going to lead to anything good. And so having one cookie, you don't need five. You don't need cookie and cake and ice cream, right? So it's like it enters into a category, and that category is a very moderated category, is the way I see it. That way it's, you give it the respect that it deserves, and then it's a lot easier to keep it under control. And so by moderation with social media is typically time-based, and so that's one way to moderate. Another, other ways to moderate, obviously, just like different boundaries you can put into place. But why is that so important? And so there is a lot of research, but we'll point out a couple of pieces of, there's a British study in 2018 that was talking about how social media can actually lead to decreased and disrupted and delayed sleep. And it can be associated with depression, memory loss, poor academic performance. And so it can turn into something that could be quite negative and really impact you in not a good way for pushing your life forward. So just like, again, alcohol, right? Alcohol could turn into something where you're using it on a daily basis for coping, and that means that you're not actually being productive. And so it's actually leading to decreased productivity. So social media can be the same exact thing. It can be a crutch where you're pulling yourself out of real life and the day-to-day of what's in front of you, and you're in this world of where that's not necessarily real. It's what people want you to see. It's not necessarily real. So the more that you get pulled into that, it can lead down this disruptive path. So Dr. Bobby, how many people use social media?
So there was a Pew Research Center. And so this is back in like 2018, 2019, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, I can only imagine that it has skyrocketed through the pandemic and through there. But at that time, 69% of adults and 81% of teens. And if you think of where that's important, is these platforms are designed to be addictive, like highly addictive, because they want to keep your attention. They want to keep you online, and they want you repeatedly checking, because that's how they make money. In all honesty, the more you're on, the more you use it, the more money they make. And so I think with teens, it's really important to realize that more teens than adults use it. And that's when their brain is still developing. That is when they're learning self-worth. That is when they're exploring who they are. And I know as an adult, I have trouble with it sometimes. So I can only imagine growing up through a time period where I'm trying to figure out who I am, and kind of all these images and stuff being brought in. It could be very challenging. And I think a lot of times we don't realize is social media, when it's used in a negative form, is really highly associated with anxiety, depression, and then it even can cause like physical ailments. So if you think about it, there's a lot of research out there that shows how our mind and our gut, or our stomach, intestines, are connected, and how anxiety and depression can turn into nausea, headaches, muscle tension, tremors, and it can mask underlying problems. So like if you're using it a lot, it could be how you're handling with stress or depression or boredom. Think about kids or adults today. If you go into a waiting room, how often do you see people just kind of sitting there looking around, relaxing? Every single person is down on their phone like this, because we can't be bored anymore. Like it's uncomfortable. It's awkward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the other thing that can happen with social media is, especially if you are on your phone at night and you're looking through feeds or reels or whatever it might be, that can lead to disrupted sleep patterns. And so, which then can impact how you're functioning the next day. Just like that FOMO, the fear of missing out. So like, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Like all these shoulds. And so it's like it just keeps pulling you out of what is actually real in your life and what is positive and functioning. And it's this constant like, is this, the grass is greener kind of thing. And so like maybe not really having an appreciation for what is in front of you, because we're constantly looking towards something else because it's so easy. It's so easy to get to. It's right there on
I was
your
gonna say, I
phone.
have my phone. In 1 second,
Mhm.
I switch. My body actually knows like where to turn, what to do. I don't even have to think to get onto Facebook or
Mhm.
TikTok. Like it's so easy to just get onto it.
Right.
And you do it without even realizing it half the time, probably.
Oh yeah. Yeah. When we talk about like barriers, there's like very little when it comes to barriers. Like your phone even unlocks when you hold your face up to it. You don't even have to remember the passcode. I mean, so like the amount of barriers that have been eliminated so that it's so accessible is a big part of why it can get out of hand. Because it's meant to be addictive. It's meant to get you to keep wanting more and more. And so that's the idea behind it. I mean, I remember when, Facebook was like first starting, right? So I was in college. I didn't know what it was. Like one of my friends, we were sitting in our room and one of my friends was like asking me these questions. And I was like, all these answers, what are you talking about? And so they were making my first Facebook profile for me because, I would never take the time to sit down and do that. That was just not my value. But like, no, you need to be on this, because one day when we graduate, this is going to be like an easy way for us to stay connected. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And so that's kind of how it started, was just interconnecting people that aren't necessarily in the same physical space. So like that's really cool. But then obviously as it grew and more platforms and more research and everything else that happens, it has turned into much, much more than that. And so and again, we're biasing on the negative side with the beginning of this to kind of show the why behind the episode and the why behind moderation and how important it is to have moderation, because there are very real negative side effects. And it's something that, again, just have the respect for it.
I
So
think
yeah.
I think one way to kind of explain, and I agree, like talking about negative, I promise we're going to talk positive because there's so much about it, or just ways to manage it. But I think it's important to understand how it affects us.
Mhm.
Because if we don't understand how it affects us, we're not going to take those steps to improve our relationship with it.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, so we say it releases dopamine in our brain, these chemicals that make us feel good. So if you
Mhm.
think about it, you post a picture and it gets a lot of likes, you're like, oh, you just naturally feel good. And how it is addictive is not only with that release, but the other part of it is the uncertainty. So kind of think of gambling. If you knew you were always going to lose when you gambled, you probably wouldn't do it. So it's kind of similar. When you post something, you don't know how many likes you're going to get, how many comments you're going to get, who's going to react. So you're looking at not only who liked it, what did they say, who didn't like it. All these things are going through your brain, but you're always trying to post. And I see this a lot, and I realize it in myself a lot, but I also see it in teens, with pictures getting like, they only post pictures of themselves and like positions where they think they look good, things like that. And that's all they're posting, is trying to get more likes, more people to follow them. But you don't know who's going to like it. You don't know how many you're going to get. So there's that level of uncertainty that kind of keeps you coming back for more and trying. Later in the month, we'll talk about perfection and anxiety, trying to get that perfect picture, trying to get that perfect post, trying to get where everyone likes and accepts you, and just that connection there. And that's kind of where some of the addiction comes from as well, or the negative aspects of social media, is
Mhm.
that uncertainty with what you're going to post and then always trying to improve on each post.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, if it doesn't go well, then it's like, oh, well, obviously that's not good enough. If it does go well, then it's like, oh, you just, won big. And really, there's so many like algorithms and everything that like go into it that like it's it's really not in your control is the real answer. And so that is what kind of also leads to that anxiety of like why wouldn't they love this or why wouldn't they love that? Well, it might not even it might not be in someone's feed. They might not have even seen it. So I mean, I know that's something that like, you know, I've thought in the past of like, oh, like I posted this and I thought like people would like it a little bit more, but I mean, I guess not, you know. And then like, you know, especially like with the business, I'll post something else that's like really similar and it'll get like 3 times the amount of views. And it's like, what? So there's so much to it that like with algorithms and whatnot, I don't understand all of that. So much to it.
There's a really, really good, and again, it talks a little bit more negative, but I think it explains really, really well why social media was created. And the creators of social media created it to be a very good thing. And then how it has turned. There's a documentary out there called Social Dilemma. If you haven't seen it, I think it's really good, not to speak badly of social media, but just to be aware of like the backside and the computer end, like what companies are doing now to grab your attention. And it's all about your attention, because if they have your attention, they're making money. And we live in a world where everything, a lot of business is all about money. That's how we survive is. So I think it's really good to understand that backside of things, so you can also then understand yourself better and your reactions and your feelings and your emotions, because that's ultimately what's the most important thing.
Yeah. But I do think that now, flipping to the positive side of social media, I do think social media is a way where we can access information from people that we know, because it's really hard in a world where, you know, we're busy and we have families and work and, you know, other things going on, to really pick up the phone and connect with our friend from high school or a friend from college or a friend from, you know, these different phases of life. Because like, if I'm available at this moment, they are not necessarily available at that moment. And so sometimes social media keeps us a little bit more connected. So that way, when there is that down moment, I'm more likely to be like, oh, hey, like, I wonder how she's doing. Like I saw like last week that they were doing something with their family. So it helps keep you a little bit connected in that way. And at least that's how I feel, you know, my husband's family lives all over the place. My family lives all over the place. And so it's like a really fun way for me to kind of be able to see that cousin that I don't necessarily like, I'm not that close to, you know, like we saw each other every couple of years growing up, but like being able to kind of like watch as she's growing her family and I'm growing my family, I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm more likely now to like pick up the phone and say like, hey, like, how's it going? Oh, hey, yeah, good. So like there's ways where we can kind of use it to not compare ourselves to somebody else, but just to stay connected with what's going on. And the same way of like, if you're looking for information, I mean, like there's such cool stuff out there. I mean, like if I'm learning a new platform, like for example, using Canva, right? Canva is like really, really cool. And there's this gal on Instagram that posts all this stuff on like just tips and tricks for Canva. And so like, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's helpful. That's really helpful. And so it's helped me grow in different like, you know, platforms that I don't necessarily know how to use. And it's like, oh, wow. And it's in, you know, manageable bits. I don't have to take an hour to watch a tutorial. And so it's like in a good way, like, I'm like, oh, hey, and I'll send this to Dr. Bobby. I'm like, hey, did you see we could do this? Oh, no, I didn't know that. So like, it doesn't have to be negative. Like Dr. Bobby, what are other ways that you use social media in a positive realm?
So I like how you said that, like a lot of times, so recommendations. So, you know, I was looking for what's really, when I was making my baby registry, what's really needed, like in your opinion. And again, but you have to, like everything you put out there, you have to also then review it and make sure like the information you're getting, is this true? Is this factual? Or is this just something someone's making up? So putting out there, like, what did you feel like was really important when you had a newborn? Like what stuff did you actually need and what is like nice to have? And so you can get information from a lot of people to kind of then process your own thoughts and process your own beliefs and kind of things like that. So I find finding recommendations. I'd much rather get a recommendation from a friend or a family member than some random just internet website, because these are people that I trust, and that most of them sometimes on my social media, I have a lot of people that I've just met through the years because of business. And just like Two Gals, there are businesses out there that try to do positive things. So on our Instagram, we have a quote every day in our stories. So just trying to be uplifting, positive things. So I do think recommendations is a huge area. I do also, like you said, Dr. Jess, like keeping up with friends and stuff. But I always have to remind myself that like the online interaction isn't the same as in person or on the phone. So it's really good that I can keep up with it, but I have to like consciously make an effort to call once in a while. Now, it doesn't need to be every week, every month, but kind of keeping that interaction with them. But it allows me to see their day-to-day life. So then when I do catch up, it's like, oh, how'd this go? How is this? Like, instead of just feeling the whole life story for the last 5 months when I hadn't talked to them. So I do find those are things that I really enjoy with it.
Yeah, I feel like I found myself more likely to connect because they're more in the forefront of my mind.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I'm like, someone will ask like, oh, hey, have you heard from so-and-so recently? You're like, huh, no, I haven't, kind of those. But like, if I've seen them recently on social media, like, oh yeah, like I think they moved somewhere. Yeah. So like next time I'm in the car for a little bit, I'll like kind of give them a call. Hey, like, how's it going? I saw that you moved. Oh yeah, I did. It was, yeah, it was a job or this or that. And so it just kind of like helps keep these people that I actually do care about. But like, you just, different phases of life, you move and you go, from school to work to jobs to cities to, and it's not necessarily that, we have the same group of people that we're with on a day-to-day basis in our lives. So it really is nice to stay connected with not everybody that you've ever encountered, but like the people that really were positive at that point in your life. It is kind of nice to keep those connections.
It is. And I think one thing that is healthy with social media is that I'm working on, I would say, is like when I'm posting stuff, I try to post realistic. Like I don't try to use all the filters to make myself look better, like learning that I don't need to have my makeup completely done every time. The picture, I can look bad, it's okay. Because what I see in myself is not the same what others see. And so trying to be very realistic with what I'm posting has been it's hard. I don't want to post a picture that I think like I look terrible in. But I feel like that's one thing that helps me is just making sure when I'm posting, it's very real and not all made up.
Right. Yeah. Like not too much perfection has gone into it. Yeah. By any means. I totally get that. Yeah. Like I barely brush my hair on the weekends, let alone put on makeup. Not happening. So like, it's just like, that's who I am. Yeah. This is it. Like, you're not going to get anything that's going to take too much effort, because like, that's not what it's about. It's not about me trying to like be something for somebody else. It's like, this is me and my family and whatever it is that we're doing. And I mean, like it or don't. Like, well, I like what I'm doing. So that's
exactly. And I think it helps. So one of the big negative side effects of social media is, besides anxiety and depression, is self-esteem and body image issues. So the more that people post realistic photos and the less they use filters, the better our brain is getting. Like, and when I see those pictures, or Jess, I see your pictures from the weekend, like I'm not sitting there reviewing them being like, oh, her hair's a little bit out. Oh, she didn't wear makeup today.
Over here and over
right, right. Those are never my thoughts.
Yeah.
So why do I feel like those are the thoughts that other people are having of me? I see the kids playing. I see the garden behind you. Like I see the fun bike rides, like that's what I see from an outsider perspective. So trying to teach myself that. And I think the more that people can put real photos out there, unedited photos.
Mhm.
I think that would really help with that self-esteem and body image, because in real life, we're not perfect. Our skin is not this perfect, blurred skin,
Right.
like we all have imperfections, and that's what makes each person beautiful in their own way.
Absolutely. If we all look the same, it would be so boring. If we all had the same exact like skills and things that we're good at, it would not, the society wouldn't work. So like I think it's just a matter of like just having acceptance of yourself then helps you better with acceptance of others. And you really start to realize how all of our diversity is really what makes things work. And that's the whole point, is that we
Mhm.
each are different. Different isn't bad, different is good, actually. So if we're talking about like the positives, I mean, I really like, I've learned so many things on social media, like
Yeah.
that are positive things. And I use it, I think, mostly for like things like that, I'm not really good in the digital realm with um like necessarily like understanding from a marketing perspective for the business, like understanding some of the platforms that are useful and what are different areas that are going on that can help us move a business forward. And so I use it to really kind of get some good advice. And again, you got to consider your source and everything else. But it's interesting if you see a topic that's kind of trending amongst a couple of different sources, then you're like, this is interesting. Maybe I'll look into this. And it's typically something that's pretty cool. I'm like, oh wow, like I would have never done a Google search to find that. So it's like, I think as individuals, as we share our knowledge, which is really cool, we're sharing our individual knowledge through our own like page or pages, depending on how many platforms you're on. It's another way to get that disseminated across a large group of people, which is very cool. So you don't have to like write a book and like print it and publish it and ship
Mhm.
it. I mean, that is a way of getting information across, but now it's really cool to be able to do that. And then to use other people's knowledge to help you gain knowledge. So like it is pretty cool in that realm. uh, I do think there's times where it's important to choose who you follow and who you unfollow, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so if you're following some groups and you're like, oh wow, maybe it's funny. Like I've got one lady, she posts daily, and I just, like she's got these hysterical like little comments. It's all about being like a parent, and they're absolutely hysterical. And so like things like that are funny or uplifting or like have good knowledge to them are usually things that I'm like, oh yeah, I'll follow that. But the minute that it starts getting kind of like negative or like, ugh, I don't really like that, or putting somebody down or things like that, I'm like, unfollow. No, thank you. I don't need that, you know?
Mhm.
And so there's strategies that you can use to kind of say, hey, I either want this in my feed or I don't. And so you have that control to be able to like say who you follow and who you don't.
And I
But
think that's specifically like with Facebook, because Instagram's a little different. You follow or you unfollow. Where
mhm,
Facebook, you can be friends with someone, but you don't have to follow them, which means they don't need to show up in your newsfeed. Because most of us, when we're going on Facebook and scrolling, we scroll through reels, or we scroll through stories, or we scroll through our newsfeed. And all three of those, you have control over who's in it. In a way, there is algorithm, there is stuff in the back, but if you see someone that's constantly negative, and I've done this, I'm still friends with them, but I just go to the three buttons and I click unfollow. That way they're not showing up in my stories, they're not showing up in my news feed, but I'm still friends. I still can have that communication. And if I want to see what they're doing, if they come pop in my head, I can search and I can pull up their profile and
mhm,
see from there. But at least I'm not getting bombarded every day or every time I'm on by negative things.
mhm,
So I think that's like one way. If we kind of look at like, how can we take this and turn into good? How can we use social media as good? How can we prevent? There's also another word out there, digital burnout. When I was reading on this, there was a survey And it was like thousands of workers, and they spend over 7 hours a day on a screen. And I think that's crazy. That's like more than some of us sleep that you're spent on a screen. So what can we do to help decrease that screen time, but also decrease the negative aspects of social media and digital, basically burnout? And one of them is just to control who you see on your social media. I think it's important to not compare yourself. That's another negative effect we can have, is even though it's all positive, we start believing people have perfect lives, because most of us aren't posting the bad things that happen in our lives. We don't want to share that. We want to share the vacation pictures. We want to share the family, the cute baby, the new puppy. We want to share those good things. So I think it's important in the back of your mind to also realize that people are posting their highlight reel and not their whole lives. But monitor what you take and make it good. And there are platforms out there that share just good information. So I think, Jess, we were talking, one way is like monitor the news, whether it be politics, natural disasters, health scares, tragic events. Monitor how much that you are being exposed to that. Yes, it's important to know a little bit about what's going on in the world, but do you need to know every single detail and every single place and every bad thing that happens? No. I remember I had I did a travel physical therapy for a little bit. And so for 4 months, I lived in a extended stay hotel, and I had like 7 channels. And the only channels I liked to watch were, one was the news, and the other one was, which was Sheldon, that show.
Oh,
Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I got to watch a lot of news and a lot of Big Bang Theory. And after a while, I like found myself being so negative and starting to get anxious. And I realized it's because I was watching news, and what sells on news? Bad news.
Right.
Tragic events, natural disasters. Like that's what our social media.
Yeah. Every tiny crime, if there wasn't a big crime, they were reporting on the small crimes.
Right.
Like, they're car checking in this neighborhood. And you're like, yeah, okay.
And I just found myself kind of going down. So I ended up for a while, and to this day, I don't watch a lot of news. Like if I hear something, I'll look it up to be aware of it, or patients will tell me. But I can't tell you the last time I sat down and watched the actual news. And I think that's a good way. There are 3, we'll post them in the thing, but there's things on like Instagram that just share good news, like Good Humanity. One's Tank's Good News. There's Good News _movement or Upworthy. And those 3 are on Instagram, and they just share uplifting good stories. So like changing kind of that will also help you not be scared of everyday lives. We all know about the mass shootings. We all know about that, but we can't live our life in fear and never go to a movie theater again, never go to a school. Yes, we need to be educated. Yes, we need to have knowledge and kind of know what to do, but doesn't mean we need to live in fear of it.
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes it's important to have that, like, just have a little bit of a barrier to that and say, okay, here's where I'm going to, here's some places where I'm going to get my news sources. And, there's all sorts of like podcasts that are out there that if you hear a tidbit, then they'll kind of delve in more into it for like the back and forth of what that topic might be, because oftentimes the topics, you get the information from this perspective, but the other perspectives aren't necessarily reported. So if you hear about something, you're like, that's interesting, then you can typically find that topic where it's been broken down, and there might be a group of people that are coming from different perspectives to kind of better educate on what that topic might be. Now it's not so scary, and it's not so like one-sided or another side, because really, when they say there's 2 sides to every story, right, there really is 2 sides to every story, and oftentimes there's more than 2 sides. So that's kind of the way I normally go about. If there's like a topic that I hear about, I'll usually try and find some information, pop in my earbud while I'm running or in the garden, and just kind of learn a little bit more about it before I really draw a major conclusion.
I think a great example is, we all know when you turn on the news, most of us turn on the same channel, and they know there's different sides, and you know what they are. There's Fox and there's CNN and there's other things like that out there, but you also know they're on the separate sides of the spectrum. And so they're going to report their beliefs and what they want their people to believe and what they know their customers like. Because they're gearing towards that, because again, it's about views. The more people watch them, the more money they make. So like making sure your sources are coming from all different areas so you can get those all different perspectives, and keeping, probably the hardest part of that is keeping our brain open to
Mhm.
see the other perspective. And I think that's very hard, especially when you feel very strongly about something.
Well, I think that's how, when you choose who you follow different perspectives. Even like I mean, I listen to perspectives I don't agree with, but I want to understand, where are you coming from? Like, what's your why behind what you're, because I mean, clearly there's a whole group of people that believe this. So, I mean, what's the why behind it? Because like this side one thing might make sense to me, but then I'll hear something, I'm like, oh, that does kind of make sense. I see what they're saying there. This is actually more complicated than I realized. That I see where there's some flaws here, because it's like you can kind of see both sides. Oh, okay. Well, I think that's where it's like, I think it helps us to better moderate and be like a little bit more in the middle of things, and say like, you can have any belief you want. I mean, that's the freedom of living in this country, is that we have free speech, we have open belief systems. But it is the way social media has really benefited financially is by polarizing and creating these very polarizing topics. And then we just go bonkers in different directions. And it fuels everything,
Yes.
and I think the more that we don't kind of buy into that, like, all of this group is horrible and negative, and I'm going to post all this horrible stuff about it, and then you're thinking, all these people hate me, oh my goodness, this is terrible. It's like, I mean, you gotta just throw that out the window. It's
Right.
it's
Yes.
meant to be polarizing. That's the purpose. And so taking a step back and saying, like, I realize the intention of this is to be polarizing. Just know that that's the intention. So it's like, if someone comes into the room and they're like, I don't believe in physical therapy, their intention isn't to get better. So I'm like, oh, that's an interesting comment. Let's dive into that. Like, what are you doing here? Like, I don't believe in this. I'm like, is that a belief system? So same thing with social media. It's like, it doesn't need to be your belief system. This really is, it's just data points. Just data points. That's all it is. And you develop your own belief system based on the data points that you see. And so don't let somebody else give you what you believe. Gain as much data points as you can in a time efficient manner. Don't take all day, scrolling through crap. Moderate how much time you're on it, but consider your source. If your source is meant to be really like big and provocative and like trying to be loud about everything to draw your attention, it might be biased. Like,
Right.
it might be biased. And we see that on everything, and these like big topics that come out, and it's not meant to bring people together. It's not meant to help us feel connected in a societal manner. It's meant to have the haves and the have-nots, the ins and the outs. And the minute that we start thinking like that's when anxiety and depression and everything else start coming in. And that's what we start seeing with our teens, and the bullying and everything that happens, the haves and the have-nots, the ins and the outs. And as long as you're in, you're happy and you have self-worth and value. But the minute that script flips, you're out. So now you're depressed and you're down, and it's like, what? Like, good night. No. This is a non-real world. You're in this world with the people in front of you. So so other ways that we can, outside of monitoring and who you follow and whatnot, is connecting with real people in front of you. So that might be in person, that might be video calls, that might be even just like, someone that might have like a major time difference, what I'll do is we email. And just because of like, if, I've got, if I have a friend that's like 9-hour time difference because they're like in another country for a while, then we'll do emails back and forth, or really just try and connect with real people that are part of your, your support system is key. Take that time to do it. Video calls are great if you're not in the same geographic region. It's really nice connection because you're getting that visual connection, in addition to auditory connection. So you're kind of getting connected in two ways, even though you don't have the physical presence.
And I think what's important, and I completely agree, especially so there was a time where my best friend was in Japan, and it was a 16-hour time difference. So it was really hard at times to connect. So we did a lot of texting and knowing she would respond when she got it. And she did the same with me. But then we try to plan once in a while, like actual conversation. It wasn't as often as we'd like. But I think it's also then important to realize those people that are close to you, you don't want to do that digital. You want that face-to-face, because in-person contact with others, that's like required to release those trigger hormones that help alleviate stress. They make you feel happier, healthier, and more positive. So they provide stuff that digital content can't do. And that digital content is excellent. I don't want to put that down. It's excellent when you're apart from people, because that's what you can do. And, FaceTime, you can see people. Zoom, you can see people. But actually being in person with someone is really important. And then one thing I'd love to talk about, Jess, is we're talking about that in person, but what can we do to minimize distractions? Because how many times are we in person, but there's a lot of distractions? And one of the things that I think many of us, and I am including myself in this, struggle with is responding. We get a notification, an alert, a text message, an email. How many times do you pick that up and you're like, you got to respond right away? Or on the verse of it, you send a text, that phone is always with that person, but they don't respond to you. Like, we want such that instant gratification, and it almost creates impulse control problems, because we have that hyper connectivity. We have those constant alerts. So like a really good challenge is like, don't respond right away. If you're busy, focus on what you're doing. Dr. Jess and I have talked a lot about time blocking. Make an hour in your day. This is when I'm responding to emails, and any email outside of that, you don't respond to, especially when it's related to work. Family, that's different, especially when it's related to work. Like, you don't need to be checking your work email before you go to bed at night. Now, are there rare instances where, yes, there's something you need to respond to at night or in the morning? Yes. But 90% of the time, if not more, you don't need to read those emails before you go to bed or first thing when you wake up in the morning. So it's like learning to put those barriers around you. Don't respond to them right away. That creates that constant sense of urgency, which also increases our anxiety because we always feel like we're overwhelmed. There's always things being asked of us. So one way is just, I think, when you're having dinner with family, with friends, when you go out, go to a movie, you're watching TV, put your phone away. I love when I hear families, they have a basket, and when people come over, the basket, the phones are there. And that's where they stay. And so being able to disconnect from that and actually enjoy being present with the person you're there. It's only probably a few hours. You can leave your phone for a few hours. But just what are some other like tips you have like that we can disconnect and be more present?
Yeah, I mean, I love putting the phone down. I love that. I think other things that are important to just kind of disconnect from the phone, especially, is like at night, and like when you're trying to like kind of calm down and get ready for bed, part of a nighttime routine, like maybe taking a warm shower, brushing your teeth, doing some lotion, whatever it might be, like whatever your normal routine is, then in the dark, because, our melatonin is like kind of helpful of like in a dark setting, like reading a real book, like a book where you actually have pages that you turn, instead of having that light shining on you. And it's just, again, with impulse control, if you have this book on your phone, how easy is it to click the social media button instead of this book that you want to be reading, right? So
Mhm.
it just kind of helps with impulse control if you don't even just plug that into charge and then just pick up a real book, whatever you might be interested in, and just kind of let that kind of be the way that you calm down, and then you don't have all of the distractions and everything else, and then you sleep better. And so I don't like I don't read books online. I, I
I
I
don't
don't
either.
I like a paperback book because then I'm not on a device at all,
Mhm.
limiting that screen time. And so I think, yeah, just as you know, I wear a watch, so I've got this, and that helps me stay connected when I'm at work and away from my family. But I take this off. I may do when I run, I guess, but like otherwise, like on the weekends or if I'm home at night, like I take all of that off, and I try and just kind of like be in my home with my kids, and I will like check and make sure like, hey, nobody like, like we're about to have sit down for dinner, make sure everything's okay. I'll check and make sure we're good. um but I don't like leave all of my notifications on. And that's the other thing is like
Mhm.
on your phone is just like turning off notifications. And so like if I look at my phone and I've got something that pops up, it's usually going to be a text message or a call. My work email, I do have that notify my phone because I do kind of like, I need to make sure that's not something I need to respond to, but those are the only 3 notifications that I get. I don't get any other notifications on my phone because I need to know what's going on with my business, and I need to know like, is my family safe? Like,
I was gonna say, I think that's a huge one, and that's one that
yeah,
I do a lot. And it's
yeah.
helps with my watch too, because then I turn off all notifications. So Facebook, Instagram, even like the stores you buy from, they're
Mhm.
always sending you deal, deal, deal. Like I go through and I turn everything off. Now,
Mhm.
sometimes people get upset because that means I may not see the message they sent me for a few hours or a day or so. But in
Mhm.
my mind, it's okay, because like if it's really important, you're going to call me or you're going to text me.
Right.
Um, and anything outside of that, it's nice, but it can wait.
Well, and you should tell people that are close to you, like, hey, like in my family, we have a code. Like, if there's a missed call and no voicemail, like, I'll probably just call them to say hi. 2 missed calls in a row, call now. So that's like our code of like, hey, I really need to get your attention. So 2 missed calls, no way, I'm calling back like right away. So otherwise, it's like, oh, hey, they were just calling to catch up. I'll call when I have time. So
Yeah.
you can have codes with the people that are closest to you to make sure that, you're not like jumping to like return that message. So yeah.
One other very helpful thing, and I love that phones created this now, is the do not disturb.
Mhm.
And they also then have a focus too. So for me, my do not from 9 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning, there's no notifications on my phone, no calls, no texts. I do have it set up that my immediate family, Dr. Jess is one, and then my boyfriend, anything they send me, call me or text me will come through.
Mhm.
Outside of those people that are in my list of quote unquote favorites, that's what it calls it. Um, they don't go through, which is really nice, because after 9 o'clock, I don't need to be getting random text messages. Um, it is also nice that some people can then send those messages and know that it's not going to bother me, or it's not going to wake me up, and I'll see it in the morning when I get there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to moderate to still keep things in a positive realm and have a little bit like you'll gain more from it, and we can kind of really get ahead of some of these negatives.
Mhm.
So the whole point is that it's not negative. It doesn't have to be. It can be. And so that it's just like anything else in our lives that do deserve our respect, just like alcohol, just like sugar, just like tobacco. Like there's things that really deserve respect, to make sure that we're like, hey, we have to be careful with this because it easily can get out of hand. And so having that helps you to then be proactive, to not wait until there's a problem, get proactive about the problem. And if there is a problem, then diagnose that there's a problem and then implement solutions to that problem. So either way, the knowledge is helpful. So
Mhm. And one last thing I'll tell you, and I think it's a great eye opener, especially if you've never monitored like what you do with social media is, and now I can speak of iPhones. I do not have an Android, so I am sure it's out there. But on an iPhone, you can put limits on your apps. So for me, I have an hour limit on social media. And when that hour is up, it does not mean it takes it away from me. I have the option to extend it for a minute, for 15 minutes, or extend it forever for that day. But it makes me aware of, oh, I didn't think I spent that much time on social media today. And most of the time it's that mindless, like open, scroll, close, but 2, 3, 5 minutes add up throughout the day. So I think that's a great way to kind of just actually become aware of how much you're even using it if you aren't sure. Is kind of putting those limits on there. So there's so many different things you can do to make it a healthy relationship. It's just first recognizing where are you with your relationship with social media and digital context.
Yeah. So our challenge for today is to actually try and diagnose, is this an issue for you? Or if it's not, find a way. So like find some solutions. So either, hey, I could see where this could be. So here's a couple things that I could try. Or this is an issue because you're kind of seeing it. Here's a couple things I could try. Either way, try and implement at least one proactive or reactive solution, whether it's turning the phone off, not off, but like, putting it down when you come inside, or turning off notifications, or putting on some of these things that you're following, how long you're on an app, for example, reading paper books instead of reading a book on your phone, like any of these different things that we talked about. Try implementing one of them and see if it helps you either react to an issue or be proactive to prevent an issue. So share this information with anybody else in your life that you think might find it helpful. It's a pretty big topic, so I would think other people might find it helpful and beneficial. And that it's not all negative. It really isn't. It's not gloom and doom. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So, all right, everybody, well, stay tuned for the rest of the month. We have some fun topics coming up in mental health awareness. Thank you for listening to the episode today. If you would like to learn more about how Two Gals can support you, then join our Two Gals Insiders membership, which can be found at www.2-gals.com. Also, don't forget, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook as well as Instagram. Okay, everybody. Bye. Enjoy your week.